Ohio gozaimasu, everybody. I might look a little bit different because I'm not Garrett. I'm Nick. You might remember me from last week. I'm subbing in for Garrett while she is traveling. And we have something that's pretty topical, actually, for me. Last week, you saw me here as the Duke of Burgundy doing a little bit of that speech. And because this month is Henry V month in honor of St. Crispin's Day, which is this month. It's October 25th, the Feast of St. Crispian. And it's not the most famous Henry V speech, which most people think of, which is the once more into the breach, rousing the troops. But it comes later in the play when he's trying to convince people to rouse themselves to fight.
In a moment when they are hopeless.
And while we will be talking a little bit about Burgundy, because he lists off many plants, there are, believe it or not, more plants in the rest of the play. So we are welcoming Drew back here to make a drink inspired by Henry V. Let's just jump right in here. So hi, Drew. You're already here. So hello. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's one of those strange warm October days that inserts itself into Northern California weather. So it's good.
Yeah, I wish that the weather was that good here in New York right now. I miss Vermont falls. Those are sort of peak fall is, and any Vermonter will probably tell you that because, that's what we're trained to say. So what are we making today?
So speaking of terrains or landscapes or stuff, this is a cocktail inspired by the fields of France, and I'm calling it a Fields of France Martini. What it really is a Fields of France Gibson. And a Gibson is a classic martini that instead of using an olive, you use a cocktail onion. But in this case, we're using something a little more on point, which is something mentioned in Henry V by Fluellen and others, which is a leek. You see the little leek medallion there.
Oh, Wales.
Oh, Wales.
Oh, Wales. So is this one of your equal parts cocktails, or are you moving away from that theme?
It's not equal parts. It's martini specs. So a typical martini, what you use is 2 parts, depending on the size of your glass, 2 parts gin or vodka, and 1 part vermouth. Now, a lot of people will change up those specs and make a martini really dry, which doesn't have very much vermouth at all. I, however, think that vermouth is delicious and will always use the proper amount of vermouth, especially in days like today where I've made my vermouth myself out of weeds mentioned by Burgundy and others that grow in the fields of France. And some also grow in the fields of California, so it's nice.
That's nice. So what's in that vermouth then? Or I don't know if this is taking things out of order or not, but I'm just curious what's in that.
No, so of this style of vermouth that I made, aptly enough, is the French style of vermouth, which most people think of now as dry vermouth, which is what you use in martinis, or you add to a Manhattan to make it a perfect Manhattan as opposed to a sweet Manhattan. And so there's no sugar added to this, even though there is sugar mentioned in Henry V. It's just not on brand for this type of martini. So what you do to make a vermouth is basically a fortified wine. So you add, you boil, what you do with this is you boil up your wine, white wine in this case, as dry as you can, and then you add flavorings. In a typical vermouth is named after, we talked in another episode, vermouth is the German word for wormwood, or a German word for wormwood. Instead of wormwood, we use docks and clovers and nettles are flavoring agents for this, and also some nutmeg to bring the spice up a little bit and make it give it a little kick. So, and then by fortifying it, you're going to add a little bit of brandy or a little bit of gin or a little bit of vodka, just a tiny bit to make up for the alcohol you've boiled off when you've made your wine.
Yeah. Here's a question. We've talked on the show many times in the past about nettles and cooking with them, using them. But one of the things that I was always curious about, and that I think is a common question, is Do you know, do you have to cook them for a certain amount of time to keep them from to lose that stinging quality when it's being something that's infused or drunk, or is it just kind of cooked like any other herb?
If you cook them, they tend to wilt down and become a little more. This I use dry nettles
Hmm.
because when you dry out an herb, um, you actually get more flavor. You enhance the flavor of it, so it's a little stronger. So I had no problem with stinging or anything during this recipe because
Good.
they were already crushed up and
Yeah.
prepared.
And I think it's interesting and worth mentioning too about that vermouth, looking at the different herbal levels that we're working with here. I actually know firsthand, I got stung with nettles. I mean, I think many people probably have, but it was when we were working on the Chelsea Flower Show booth for a botanical Shakespeare. And one of the remedies for that is docks, that you can crush them up and put them on that. And we, unfortunately, we didn't have any or couldn't find any. But I just think that's great that they're both in that. That the cause and the remedy are
Yeah,
both in the vermouth.
what a happy accident. I didn't know that. That's
Very.
fantastic. So the plant that is named the most amount of times, as far as I can see in this play, is grass. They don't necessarily say what type of grass, but you talk a lot about grass. You're in the fields, you're out there in battle. You imagine, I think when we all imagine battles, medieval battles happening, we all imagine them happening in a field.
Yep, that tracks.
And so this is actually a type of vodka called bison grass vodka. It comes from Poland, but it is the only thing that I could get my hands on that actually tastes like grass. So here's our other ingredients. So you have your gin or vodka, in this case, vodka, grass vodka. You have your vermouth. A lot of people will add orange bitters, but there's no oranges mentioned in this play, so I'm going to leave it out. And then you have your little garnish. So it's very, very simple. And it's going to be very, very savory. So shall I get into it?
Absolutely. I'm
Great.
just, this is one of those ones that, yeah, I know that Garrett says this every time, but I really wish that I could taste this because the grass vodka is just, that's so like I wouldn't even thought of that being a thing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fascinating. I'll give you the tasting points when I get to it.
great.
It's almost 5 o'clock in California, so I feel a little less bad drinking this. Typically you add your, like we've said before on this program, your less expensive ingredients first, which is usually your vermouth, though the amount of stuff I bought to put in this, I'm not sure if that's the case. So you're gonna add and I'm using this in ounces. We'll talk about milliliters. So you're gonna add 1 ounce of your vermouth, which is also about 30 mils. If you're using the other system. Ooh, and I did a little much, so I'm gonna give it a little taste on its own. It's fascinating. It is very savory. You really taste the nettles there. Yeah, if you've ever had like cooked nettles, that kind of spinachy, pungent, just straight up plant taste. So I'm gonna add that, and we're gonna add it to a mixing glass with ice. Then you're gonna take your one other ingredient, which is your grass vodka, and you're gonna do twice as much vodka to vermouth. 1. Oh, I'm spilling all over the place. And give it a 2. And then you're gonna stir. So I like to stir a good amount because really what you want to do with the martini is you want to get it really chilled and nice and cold. But also adding dilution to your drinks, contrary to a lot of people's inclinations, really brings out the flavors in your ingredients. So I'm going to give it a good stir, about 30 stirs there. I'm going to put my little strainer in there. Without making too much of a mess, I'm going to strain, if you can see, into my coupe glass. You can use a martini glass if you want. Anything that's up, if you want to serve a martini up. So there we go. Now we have it poured and stirred. And now I'm going to add my last ingredient, Llewellyn's leek, to make it our Gibson. So here we have our savory Fields of France cocktail. I'm going to try not to spill it. before I taste it. Wow. Oh my gosh. I can't think I've ever had a more flavorful martini, you know.
Okay.
Because martinis, generally you want them sort of nice and crisp and clean and clear. And because it's vodka, it does taste clean. Like vodka has that sort of straight cuts right through. But the amount of flavors in the vermouth really lifted into something else. I'm gonna get another, you got a savory smell on the nose from your leek too. So yeah. Man, I really like this. It's almost like a meal.
Sounds really interesting. Yeah.
And this bison grass, the grass in it almost has a vanilla-y taste, which kind of balances out the rest of the savory flavors. Yeah, it's really nice. If I could send it through to you, I would.
I wish. I mean, it sounds like a meal in and of itself. So we always draw one of the lines of the week from the herb or plant that we've been talking about. And this week, as Drew has pointed out, everything that we're dealing with is a weed, which is interesting because usually, if you were going to ask me what I would want out of a cocktail at the bar, I wouldn't say, just go out and pick all the plants you don't want in your garden and put them in a bucket. But it sounds like this is a really, really delicious mix here. And I think that for the line of the week, because we have had a lot of Duke of Burgundy lately, and as lovely as he is, there are other there are other plants in this play, and I think one of the lines actually mentions two plants, one that isn't in this drink, strawberry and nettle, and the line is, "The strawberry grows underneath the nettle," and I just think that's a really good image, just in general, but also for now and for me and where I'm at in my life, and I think where a lot of people are in their lives, is it's sometimes hard to think about the good things when all you can kind of see are tough things or challenges or the way that the world is right now. And I think I'm not enough of a gardener to know if one would normally see strawberries growing underneath nettles, but I'm going to take his word for it. And I think that it is just a nice thing to think about, that if you lift up the leaf of the nettle, aside from getting stung, you would see a beautiful strawberry, which does pair nicely with the fact that this drink is all of these different weeds and they make something really tasty together.
I'd like to say, usually you never really hear nettles mentioned in Shakespeare in a positive light. They're always something that is painful or a nuisance. But you can make people are using it in cooking all the time, because when life gives you nettles, make nettle wine, make nettle vermouth. They grow all over the place in almost every part of the world, and they're a pain in the butt everywhere. But still, we find ways to make them delicious.
Well, thank you, Drew. This was really lovely for me to get a chance to do this also with you here. So please enjoy the rest of that drink for me, and I will go make something that pales in comparison, I'm sure, to have for myself for this evening. But just to say the line again, it's "The strawberry grows underneath the nettle," and now I want some strawberries. So thanks for coming. Cheers. I'll cheers my water with you here. Cheers. All right. Have a good one.